One of the most common questions that I get on a repeated basis is how do I continue growing my revenue or sustain my current level of income without what I'm doing now, without how I feel now, without continually sacrificing myself, without being so exhausted, without losing my sanity? How do I scale bigger or stay as big as I am, but do it differently? Today, I want to give just straightforward steps and a process that you need to go through in order to either maintain your current level of income, but do it with less stress and overwhelm, and or grow that revenue and grow your business without the stress and without the headache. Okay, so we're going to dive into that process, those steps. But before we dive into that, what I want to say is that before we can do anything tactical in the business, before you can apply any of these steps that I'm about to give you, there is an important shift that you have to make. And that shift is going to be in your mind. And that shift is going to be about believing that you can only succeed further or continue to succeed in the way that you have built your current success. So one of the biggest roadblocks that a lot of my clients have is they have this mindset that, well, since I've built it this way, it needs to stay this way. So since I've built it by working this many hours, since I've built it by not taking care of myself, since I've built this business by being stressed out and urgent, and it's worked, that is what works. And so that's the belief and the conditioning that gets instilled when it comes to business that we have to break. And so you have to first address that. First, addressing what are your thoughts when you think about pulling back on your time, when you think about working less. You are probably getting pinged consciously or subconsciously, and you're like, you can't do that. That's not possible, right? Because right now, all that your brain and your body knows is money equals what you've done so far, right? Success equals income equals this. And so you only have that proof. And so I first want to address this because there is a very interesting dialogue that happens in our head that says, I want to make more money, or I want to scale bigger, or I want to maintain this revenue, but I want to do it with less work. I recognize that the way that I'm doing things is not sustainable long term. I recognize the toll that it's taking on me mentally, physically, the toll that it's taking on my family. And so you recognize those things and then instantly get met with, but this is the only way that you can do it. And understand that that is a normal dialogue to have, because right now all you have is the proof of what you've done. And so when you're going to shift things in your business, you also have to shift the way that you operate, because I can give you all of these steps all day long on how you can do this. But if you don't believe that you can continue to succeed, you won't take these steps. And if you start to take them, you'll probably back off out of fear. And so it's very important that I just needed to get that out in the open for you, and for you to really think and be aware of that internal dialogue that's going on in your head and anything that you're telling yourself about what will and won't work for continued success of a business. I will tell you, I am living proof as somebody who has been self-employed since 2012. I pride myself on longevity, on sustainability. There have been plenty of moments of overwhelm, but I have built my business around my family, my well-being, and taking care of myself. It is absolutely possible to make the impact and the income that you want without sacrificing yourself in the process. So let's get into, speaking of processes, let's get into the process that you need to go through in order to raise or sustain your level of income without the burnout and stress and constant overwhelm and urgency and all the things that float into running a business that actually feels like shit. So let's dive in. The first step for you is going to be getting very, very clear by defining your vision and your goals. So one of the first things that I do with clients when we are struggling with creating this is we go into, okay, we need to redefine words that are currently fucked up and not aligned in your head. So things like success. What does success mean to you? What does it look like to you? Is success a certain dollar amount? Is it a feeling? Is it both? The more clear you are on what a goal is, the more you know when you reach it. And so for a lot of people, because we're actually not that clear on our goals, we just keep moving the goalposts. And so the first thing for you to do is get really clear in this new version of your business. What does it look like? How many days are you working? How do you feel? What are your interactions with your team? What are your interactions with your family? What is going on so that you can clearly identify and you can visualize the vision, but also clearly identify when it's happening and when you're there and when you're actively operating that way. And so that's going to always be your first step, is just getting clarity is always the first step, basically in anything. But for this process specifically, that's where we're starting. So clearly define what your vision looks and feels like. Clearly define what your business looks and feels like when it's succeeding. This gives you a tangible piece to hold on to. So if you say, my business is doing 2 million in revenue and I'm working 20 hours a week. Awesome. Those are clear goals. We can always back into goals. And even if the things that you write down feel like such a far stretch and so impossible, write them down anyway. So that's going to be your first step. Clearly define those visions, the vision and the goals. Next thing we're going to do is probably something that it's not very fun. It's not super shiny. It's not pretty. Anytime we're doing this with clients in the back end, it's always a little bit of a struggle because it's not something that you recognize moves the needle immediately, but is one of the most important things for longevity and long-term success. And so we're going to pop up the hood and look at what's happening behind the scenes. So a lot of times when we are overworking or overwhelmed, it is a systems and processes issue. Systems and processes, not just in the program sense, but also how we are operating inside of the business, how our processes and our communications look inside the business. And so we need to open the hood and go through what are the things in your business right now that feel very inefficient? What are the things that feel clunky? What are the things that you spend a lot of time on? What are the things that there's a lot of blockage in or require too many steps, right? And so when we can look at the things that are inefficient, then we can start creating solutions for those things, right? So let's say your onboarding process is super messy. It requires a lot of time. It's a lot of back and forth. Then we can look at that and say, okay, how do we optimize the onboarding process? And even if we're saving, 10 minutes a week, that's 520 minutes a year. Don't ask me to do hours. I was doing easy math there. But it's a lot of time. And so I don't want you to skip this part because it feels like it could be easily skipped because you're like, well, the business is, succeeding. So we're doing well. It's working. But it's not, because there's some sort of, probably many of your processes in the way in which you are a part of those processes that isn't working, right? So I've had clients who even the way that they are delegating needs to be changed. The way that they are running meetings needs to be changed. They have too many meetings. And so I want you to look at the responsibilities, the processes, the workflows, the systems that you have in your business and really think what is not and what is inefficient, what is not purposeful, what is not fruitful, what are we walking away from unclear, right? So look at your meetings, look at all the processes that you have in your business and think, how can we make this more efficient? Doing this, even though it's not that fun, is one of the greatest ways to get back your time. And it is one of the things that when I do this with clients and when I force them to, have team write new SOPs, when we make sure that things are optimize, they're like, wow, I feel such a sense of relief. Like you fully can trust your team more because you know that things are going to be done right. It is a big part of the puzzle. So that's your second step in this process. So you're going to clearly define what's the big vision, what are the goals, what are the tangible things that we know, like, okay, I've arrived, this goal has happened, I'm living in this vision. Next, we're going to look at everything, all the operations in the business and what is clunky, what are we too involved in, what's taking too long, what are we walking away from that's not fruitful or purposeful. So I want you to really do an audit of those things, of all the operations of your business. That's going to be your next step. And then step number 3 is all about your team. So I work with people that have teams in place, but usually there's a lot of team issues. A lot of those team issues are actually coming from the leader themselves, not operating in the best way, and or not communicating clearly. And so having a reliable team is really important. When you go through the operations of your business, you will likely be able to see some of the things that you are still holding on to that need to be delegated. And with that, you can evaluate, does the team I have in place fit the needs for the business? And you can be honest. I know that sometimes we hold on to people for a long time, longer than we should. I know sometimes we have the wrong people in the right role or the right person in the wrong role. And so stuff can be shifted around. But you really want to take a look at your team and your organizational structure. Do you have the right people in the right roles for the needs and the goals of the business? Evaluating each person on your team, looking at their roles and their responsibilities, and making sure that there is, while cross training can be good and having people that can do multiple things if necessary, you really want to make sure that people are clear and there's not too much overlap or overwhelm for your team members. So that's going to be your third step, is looking at your team, making sure you have a reliable team, evaluating your organizational structure, and looking at the roles and responsibilities of each person on your team to make sure that that is fitting the current needs of the business. And then your fourth step, right alongside team, is delegation, right? So not just delegating and handing things off, but actually delegating effectively. These are two different things. I have been a leader who will just spout off stuff as it comes to me. Not effective, overwhelms your people. A great way to think about delegation when you are, in the visionary seat, when you are a CEO, is having a process for which you delegate. And so for me, my process is usually it's an idea that I have or something that has come up, and I need to then go into, okay, what's the solution for that idea? Or what's the solution for the problem? Or what's the solution for the clog? And or what is the plan, right? And so a lot of times we skip the planning part. We skip getting like a full grasp of everything that's going on because we don't step back to get the data that we need or the overview. And so don't just say, hey, I need this thing done, right? We need to say, okay, I want this thing done. How do I want it done? When do I want it done? Why do I want it done? Where do I want it to be? We need to get all the details of what we want, and then we can go and delegate. And so I don't want you to skip that middle portion, because that middle portion and leaving it out is where we waste a lot of time as leaders, because then we're having to do more reviews. We're having to, what we feel like is repeat ourselves. It requires more back and forth communication, versus if you take an extra like 5 minutes on the front, 5, 10, depending on what it is that you're delegating, 5, 10, 15, sometimes it's a couple of hours if you're planning a whole project, right? You take that time on the front end to take the idea into something that becomes completely clear, then you can delegate out. And this planning part can also, if it's a big project, can be something that you obviously do with your team as well. But don't skip this part. And when you think about delegating and whether that's like a one-off task, please delegate with detail. And that is part of delegating effectively, is delegating with detail. And the more detail you can give, the more clarity that you provide them, and the less back and forth. If you want things done well and you want them done right, you want them done to your standard, those things need to be expressed on the front end. Okay? So that's your fourth step, is delegating effectively, making sure that after you've gone through all of your workflows, all your processes, all your systems, all your operations stuff, and then you've gone through your team, you can see, okay, there's some gaps here. Here's some stuff that I'm still holding on to. Okay, now we're going to make sure that when we're delegating, that we're doing that effectively. That's going to get us a lot of time back. The next thing is right alongside, again, the systems processes, is leveraging technology. Technology is something that I think I'm 36, and so the older that I get, the more I feel like a grandma, and that, like, oh, back in my day we didn't, I mean, like, my kids will never know what it, like, dial up to AOL is. Like, that's crazy. They won't even know like what a house phone is. Anyways, I think that technology is great when it's used well, right? And so it's very dependent on your energy. It's very dependent on your industry, how you leverage technology, but technology has a place in everything that we do. Utilizing things like Zapier, right, to where you can connect platforms. Utilizing an autoresponder in email so you can have a longer response time. Utilizing all sorts of systems and programs that you can do automated onboarding or offboarding. There is so much out there. You can pretty much Google anything at this point and find something that can do a job for you. And I think, again, there is places in which I think this is being overutilized, but there's still places where it's being underutilized, especially if your business is established, because we forget that we need to update things as we continue to grow. Like, how I do things now is drastically different than how I did them 12 years ago, right? And so we need to make sure that we are leveraging technology and we are using that to help us, because it can alleviate so much of our time and so much of our mental energy if it is done well. So look at those areas in which, okay, this is an area that could be automated. Here's something that, like, we have a person doing that, is kind of a mundane task. Is there a way for us to automate that? What are current systems that we're not utilizing? I will honestly tell you guys that I have been in multi-million-dollar businesses that aren't using any sort of project management software. If you don't have a clear place where you are delegating out tasks and you are managing projects, there is so much headache. And when everything lives in your head, it is just more of that mental load that you carry. And so making sure that you're leveraging technology is really important. Okay, so step number 6 is going to be prioritizing. This is where a lot of leaders get stuck because everything feels important. I understand that. You need to be able to regulate and filter through what is self-imposed urgency and what is actual urgency. And so when we are prioritizing, this is another reason why having good processes and workflows is important, because everything should be on a timeline. You should know, like, your turnaround times for deliverables. You should know how long your processes take, because you are in charge of that. And if you clearly express that to your client beforehand or at the beginning, then they know that too, and then there's less pressure, right? So making sure that you are prioritizing well, instead of just saying, I have this to-do list of 800 things. Organize your tasks, give your tasks deadlines, and make those deadlines actual priority, right? Like, make those deadlines by priority. What is due first to a client, whether it's their deadline? Do you need to shift things around for longer term turnaround times, right? Like, I understand that a lot of times we glorify faster being better, but faster sometimes can equal lower quality work, many times actually. Prioritizing is really being honest about what is of highest importance and then what order you need to be doing things in. It also will help you to prioritize if you look through the lens of your schedule itself and create clear focuses for each day. I have 2 days of my week that have no meetings and no calls. I have 2 client facing days. And so I know basically who I need to be. And like on my CEO day, I know that that's like my deep work. I know that that's my visionary time. And so being able to be who you need to be in that day. And so that will help you to prioritize. So look at your actual workload and then really think about how can I organize and prioritize this workload so that it is more efficient. The more that you are multitasking and jumping in and out of stuff, the more that you are having days with like back-to-back meetings and overloading yourself, the more that's going to pull you out of what you need to be doing, right? So prioritizing and setting rules around what your capacities are in those areas as well. Which actually brings me to step number 7, which is going to be set boundaries. This is probably the most important thing to do as you're integrating and implementing all of this into your business. You're going to need to have some standards and boundaries that you set for the way that you operate, the way that your business operates, the turnaround times, the clarity that you provide, the hours that you work, the days that you work. You have to set boundaries around those things. You need to change your availability in the calendar. You need to stop saying yes when really it's a no. You need to be okay with telling people that you don't have anything available until the next month. I mean, I've had people ask me for calls and they're like, oh, could you meet next? And I'm like, I don't have anything available until the next month. And so, yes, I understand there's a lot of fear about possibly missing an opportunity, but at the end of the day, if you take every opportunity, it's not going to feel like an opportunity because you're going to be so burnt out, right? And so setting boundaries to protect all these changes that you're making and to really align with that vision that you set, the goals that you have, is impossible if you don't give yourself the bumpers, which is what I often refer to boundaries as. They are your reminders of like what to stay into. They aren't to exclude you from anything. They are to keep you on the path to where you really want to go. And so setting those boundaries, figuring out, okay, what boundaries do I need to set to hold this, right? To where it's like, if my work hours are going to be significantly reduced, that means I need to be completely focused, which means I'm not going to have I'm going to have my phone on do not disturb, and I'm going to be completely unavailable for these 4 hours if that's what I'm giving myself. And so thinking about things like that inside and outside the business, what boundaries do you need to protect this bigger vision and the way that you're going to run your business? And then step number 8 is making sure that you're continuously investing in self-care. Self-care looks different for everybody, but it is a non-negotiable for your continued success. If you want to sustain a bigger business, then you need to be the person who can sustain that. And in order to do that, your cup needs to be full, because regardless of what people say, you cannot run anything for any number of years with an empty cup. Your mental health will deteriorate, your relationships will deteriorate. It happens all the time. And so investing in self-care isn't about like, oh, you need self-care because you need it. I mean, yes, this is true, but this is directly tied to the success of your business. If you want to continue to grow the business long-term, then you need to be prepared to do what needs to be done. And the only way that you can do that is by having intervals, basically, in which you can only push as hard as you pull back. And so self-care, taking care of our minds and our bodies, our relationships, and the things that fulfill us as humans, taking care of our human needs and having moments to where we are indulging in the life that we've built, is what allows you to keep driving a business further. And then last but not least, I feel like it's weird to end on 9 steps, but that's what it ended at. So last but not least is make sure that you have support in your corner. Support looks different based upon the season that you're in. For me personally, the role that I play in my clients' businesses and in their lives is I come in as a strategic partner. I am a thought partner for them and a strategic business coach, to where we are implementing changes like we've talked about today, but we're also working with their mind and how they operate as leaders, and doing that through a holistic view to make sure that what we're building and the changes that we're making aren't just for today, they are for your legacy. And so having a partner in your corner, having accountability in your corner, one of the things that I really pride myself on, maybe this is obviously from my fitness coaching days, but being able to call people out on their shit, being able to call people up to their potential. It is something that not a lot of people will do. But what I believe is that if you have something that is on your heart, you have something that you want to build, I'm going to hold you to that standard. If you want to set that standard, if you want to be that person, then I'm going to help you rise to that. And so just having somebody in your corner that as you navigate and implement these changes, it's not just as easy as sitting down and delegating this out and putting it on a piece of paper. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of things that you have to work through in your head, like the internal dialogue that I was talking about earlier. And so having somebody that can be there with you and walk through that with you and remind you of why you're doing it, and also offer you strategies and tactics of the changes that you need to make and help you walk through the problems instead of just taking everything on your shoulders, is one of the best investments that you can make, not just for your business, but also for your life. So make sure that you have mentorship, make sure that you have that strategic partner who also cares about your life. It's not just about the business, right? It has to be a holistic view. And of course, if you're interested in working with me, you can go to kelseykenrai.com/book a call, and we can talk about what the best option is for you. I have VIP days, I have private partnership, and I also do a CEO intensive where we can evaluate your schedule and your time. So those are different ways that you can work with me. Thank you guys for watching today. I hope this process has been helpful for you. Obviously, this was a lot, so feel free to kind of like pause, do one step at a time, take some notes, whatever you need to do. And if you have questions, I'm here. You can reach me on Instagram. You can email me at admin@kelseykenrai.com, and I'm happy to help you through. So enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next week.